Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack, back again to bring you my first impressions of the Tower of Torghast, everything that I've been liking, disliking about the tower, and where I think that it's going to be headed. So, to start it off, the basics of the Tower of Torghast are that you're going to be, at least on the alpha right now, able to queue up for some of the beginner quests that start introducing you to them, and then there's easy, normal, and heroic stages of the tower. Basically, it starts you at a certain level of the tower as mobs are progressively scaling in difficulty, and you're having different challenging boss encounters and different mechanics that you really have to worry about. So whenever you start at the heroic difficulty, you're already in the 20s, and in many cases, the tower's sort of inverted in difficulty. All of the difficulty for the tower is at the very beginning, because you're not really having any of the anima powers at your disposal. Now, the anima powers you're collecting from destroying urns, killing specific elites, and overall just clearing more floors as you go forward. Every 3 or 4 floors, you'll end up having access to the broker, and the broker will basically just sell you different anima powers and different power-ups for Phantasm. And Phantasm is collected from pretty much every mob that you could possibly kill. So for this, it's a series of progressively getting to the next floor, to the next stage, and looking for more synergistic power-ups and buffs to help you out on those floors. Some of them, for example, like for the priest, you get, whenever you mind control a maw rat, that maw rat and every other rat, just some small mob, will replicate themselves. And that's really good if you have the maw rat explosion, or if anybody else in your group has the maw rat explosion buff. So that way you can produce tons of maw rats and do pulls you otherwise would not be able to have access to. The most challenging, like I mentioned, is the very beginning of the floors when these resources are extremely limited. So in many cases, you're trying to get a lot of the resources that'll just help you stay alive and help you survive some of the pulls that you're more or less forced into doing. For example, some of the powers are not as interesting, and they'll just increase your stamina, or increase your crit strike rating, or something along those lines. For those, they can actually be really beneficial, because if you're on a floor that doesn't have any maw rats, you can't really put together big pulls and big explosions, and if you're fighting up against certain bosses, then you may not have enough damage to be able to kill them. Most of the powerful elites have this uncontrollable power buff, where you can crowd control them until they build up to 10 stacks, and in that case, they're just getting progressively more damage, and are much more difficult to kill, and your tank is forced to kite. You can also do these solo, but it's incredibly challenging to do so on, again, those early stages. So you have to rely on the layout of the dungeon, which is ever-changing, and it's always different. You have to rely on the layout to be favorable enough so you can crowd control mobs, and you have to rely on the anima powers being favorable enough so that you can actually spend time DPSing them and be able to kill them before they end up killing you. If you die too many times, you summon the Taragru, which is supposed to be unkillable, and that basically makes a run for the end of that floor. And most of the floors, they're about half the length of any standard dungeon, maybe even a quarter the length of any standard dungeon for some of them. And others are just straight up walkthroughs where the broker's there, and maybe one boss is there. And once you clear through that, you are free to go. So when you're looking at these floors, they generally don't take too much time, and there's no time limit. The challenging part is just getting momentum going and making sure that you can get favorable enough anima powers so that you can progress to higher floors. Because each floor that you're going up, you're getting more Phantasm, and you're collecting more of the anima orbs that will have these powers that you can unlock. They range from buffing any of your secondary stats to buffing your Covenant abilities, like the Kyrian ability, which is incredibly powerful for the Disc Priests, by the way, in this game mode. There's also some that will have very wonky effects. One of them, for example, is that whenever you deal arcane damage, you actually have a chance to turn the mob into an inanimate object and instantly kill them, like a chair. So with this, you're able to have some slight chance of killing mobs more easily because you're able to have these special powers at your disposal. So I'd say the good of this mode is the fact that it's ever-changing, and there's a lot of reward for just good teamwork and good flexibility in choosing your different powers. You can, for example, as a priest, you will want to take the anima power that'll allow you to mind control maw rats and spawn more of them, because somebody else in your group will cause them to detonate, dealing even more damage, right? There's different synergies that you can start opening up with different effects like that. Some of them, for example, will cause like a mage's time warp to actually increase the speed of time so that everybody else in the group gets their cooldowns back more rapidly. That's incredibly beneficial because one of the possible barriers that happen in a lot of these floors is you'll just have one floor that is one boss and you must kill it, otherwise you fail. So as you go up, it's around 2 or 2.5 deaths allowed per person. So in our group of 4 players, we were allowed to have 9 deaths before the Taragu respawns. And once you hit that 9th death, that's when it starts a timer and the Taragu respawns to basically kick your butt and kick you out of the instance as well. So some of the negative side effects, I think, is that as it stands at the moment, again, this is still early alpha, there isn't any spec-specific or role-specific type tuning. So if you're going in solo as a Disc Priest, you're going to get your butt handed to you unless you get some incredibly efficient and incredibly helpful anima powers that can help really accelerate your progression through this floor, through any of the different floors, so you can start getting anima powers. I'd say the other thing is there's some inconsistencies with some mobs that can be crowd controlled and others that cannot. Some full-scale bosses, for example, are susceptible to everything, while others are not whatsoever. So I think part of that would just be figuring out some of the consistency. And I think once you start going and building up a lot of momentum, in reality, the higher the floor that you're at, usually the easier that it is. There might be a tough boss here or there that you need a little bit of crowd control, or you might need a little bit better coordination. But in reality, we were just smoking through a lot of the runs at the very end, like the 60 to 72, which is the highest floor at the moment. It was just insanely easy, and there wasn't a lot of threat to it because our stamina was so high, because our stats were so high, and because our power-ups were making it so we could instantly obliterate pretty much anything that touched us. So I think one of the things they should be looking at the most is, do they want to have a very specific cap to the floors? How are they going to, for example, scale down those rewards? Because as it stands right now, every 4 to 6 floors we encountered a boss and they gave placeholder loot. It looked like an epic item, but they have recently said in an interview with Towley that they're not expecting a lot of gear upgrades to come from the Tower of Torghast, that it's mostly going to be for the legendary grind. So we'll see what kind of loot is there, and most of the legendary placeholder items that we received, again, were just placeholder inanimate objects that were yellow, and we found those in just random chests scattered around. So it didn't seem like there was a way for us to produce more legendary effects through Phantasm, and that Phantasm currency from killing mobs was only dedicated towards just being able to kill mobs and kill a lot of them. Not having any time limit was very good, and it just allowed us to kind of take a breather as well, because our run from the mid-20s to level 72 took a couple hours, took most of the day really, and at that point you're going to want to have a break. But they've also talked about how they want to have some sort of system to prevent you from like waiting for Bloodlust for every single challenging and every single difficult pull. And while that makes sense, I wonder what they're going to do with having a cap on the instance as well. Because if they're just sitting there and having a cap on it, well, that's just going to mean that we're going to have, oh, somebody's got to leave, I guess we have to stop the run now, or I guess we're going to have to be down a person who was fully decked out, was fully powered up, or something along those lines. So how they adjust the reward structure, I'm very interested in seeing, and how they start adjusting the instance itself is also is something that's probably on the top of my list for what I'd like to see change and what I'd like to see developed really for the system. Because they're claiming and they're saying that the enemies are going to change season by season, so with every new patch, hopefully there will be some differences and there will be some changes for the Tower of Torghast. But if this system should be dwarfing warfronts, or it should be replacing warfronts, replacing island expeditions, now is really the time for us to figure out what's going on and how best can we deal with it. As we saw with like the Taragu, for example, this big hulking beast that's supposed to shut down any sort of opposition. That was really cool, but it also was not very cool when it blocked you from even exiting the instance at the entrance of whichever floor. You have a little portal you can click on to leave, and it just kept on camping my body, really, and I just got killed over and over and over again. Entertaining, but very frustrating when you're trying to make sure you keep with your group, get everybody together, and requeue. Overall, I'm very interested to start seeing which of the other Covenant abilities will have cool interactions, and which ones we can really start playing with as we continue to see more and more content from the alpha. If you'd like to see our full run, be sure to check out the live stream linked in the description below, as we'll be putting out more and more alpha content as we can. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Let me know what you think and what you've seen so far from Torghast, and I'll catch y'all next time.